Hello, fellow writers. I'm Lewis. That over there is Tolkien, and you found the Scripturient Society.
Welcome back, everybody, to your favorite writing podcast. That over there is Karissa Harlow, aka Lewis, aka Catherine, her dark alter ego, and I am Ash O'Rourke, aka Tolkien. And I just remembered I still have my reading glasses on my head, so
Nice.
That looked really nice with my headphones.
It's a good look.
You've got your hood on over your headphones.
I do.
So you both have fun headgear going on.
I know. I don't know. I hate hoods, but I love hoods. It's a love-hate thing. So
that is so funny. TM, you guys can't take it, but I am working on I'll give you guys more of an update on in my writing update, but I think I'm going to try this book with this character. Anyway, she's an assassin and she has blue hair. And I told my husband this and he was like, yeah, because blue hair is really inconspicuous. And I was like, shut up, she can wear a hood. And so now I'm like, now I have to really remember to add that in because it's true.
Yes.
But it's based off of a dream I had where she was an assassin with blue hair. And that's all I can say, but it's mine, you guys. I mean, not that you couldn't, that's a very basic premise.
Hoods are for Ash, okay?
Hoods
no one else
wants
to use hoods.
It's more like blue-haired assassins, but I guess that could be done a million ways too.
Yeah.
So, but that's what I'm doing, you guys. Oh, yeah. Anyways, hoods are great.
I don't know. It's just a word.
It's just a word.
You're just holding up your glass like, I want to share.
Oh, am I? It's a heavy glass, so I think I'm overcompensating. I had a meeting that went long at work, and so I literally just rushed in here from that, and I'm trying to come down from the meeting. And from I worked an hour and a half late, which I don't mind doing every now and then. But I had to put up for Karissa for an hour and a half. I was like, I'm so sorry, I'm still late. To get myself to calm down, you can tell I've only had a sip of it because I'm still talking so fast. But it's got elderflower liqueur, gin, and prosecco, and it's delicious, and it's kind of a pretty green color. Oh yeah, I put a splash of curacao in it. I forgot. So all straight alcohol. Nothing in this besides the ice is not alcohol. I don't know if I'll finish it, but it's
is it technically is that an AMF? I think with curacao it is, or you just dump a bunch of stuff in there.
Oh, I don't know what's an AMF.
It's audio smother, and it's supposed to be totally. It's tons of kinds of alcohol, so it totally derails you.
I don't know. I've been making this drink because Spoons and I, Kendall Shaw, aka my podcast on the other post, my host on the other podcast,
my hot co-host over there.
Yeah, over at That Pretentious Book Club, we had a princess day, and so we made princess drinks, and so I got some special liqueurs and stuff to make themed ones. This was inspired by the Rapunzel drink I made, which had elderflower liqueur, hibiscus syrup, gin, and prosecco, and I used Empress gin, so it was it was red at the bottom, then pink, and then purple, but it looked very Rapunzel, and it was really tasty. But I didn't want to use my mom's fancy gin, and I didn't have any more hibiscus syrup, so that's why I put curacao in, so it'd be a little bit sweeter. So this was my bastardized version of that, because I was just trying to move quick and get in here, and I didn't mean for it to be a giant glass, but it ended up that way. So I was like,
you're mixing a bunch of stuff, it just adds up.
It just adds up. So we'll see. I might not finish this, and that's okay, but it's tasty and it tastes good. Not bad. Yeah. Better than the trash can drink, which is literally, I think it's some kind of vodka drink with a Red Bull dumped over in it, which is horrifying to my nervous system. I feel like that's
so contradictory.
Yeah.
What does your body even do with that?
Right? I don't know. I feel like it's really, really bad for your nervous system. I feel like I would die if I drank it. I mean, I've tried them before, but I feel like it's so bad for you. It's a stimulant and a depressant in one. Yeah. I feel like it's
which one will win?
Yeah, which is actually kind of funny because my drink, this one does look like a trash can. It does look like that, the drink trash can. Yeah. A lot of them are kind of green and blue. So it looks like that. It is not. It's all perfectly acceptable alcohols, but it's just, I made it really big. If this was half the amount, it would be a normal cocktail amount. So yeah, it's 2 cocktails in one.
Right.
What are you drinking? Water?
And Dr. Pepper, but yes.
Oh, that's right. You even said Dr. Pepper. Mm-hmm. Oh. We drank at the same time. That was cute of us.
Yay.
Clink. Yeah. Clink. Oh, cute. Well, anyways, my Lewis, how has your week been?
It's been good. Nothing super new that I can remember. In a couple days, we're gonna get the puppies spayed.
Ooh.
So, and neutered, I don't know. Is that a gender term? Is it, or is it just,
Spade is for which? Spade is for girls, neutered is for boys.
Okay. Yeah. So they're getting spayed, and that's in a couple days. And, they don't know, but I'm nervous.
Yeah, I know.
I just get so nervous about that kind of stuff. I'm like, but how do we get them into the car? And then what if I accidentally hurt them? And it
is harder for the girlies because we also need to get Winnie and Raul neutered, but and it's way less, and it's a way chiller procedure. And I still don't want to take them but that's just mostly because of the money and because they're both outdoor animals, and I'm afraid they're gonna like find a way to get it infected. But their recovery should be so much easier than your little pups. Yeah, because they have it rougher. Bao Bao is also spayed. She came from a shelter where they tattoo their tummies if they've been spayed.
So they don't do it twice.
Tattoo. I don't know, or so they don't like have to like go to the effort of finding out. But it's cute. Sometimes she rolls over. I'm like, oh, there's your little tattoo. You don't have a uterus.
He's gone.
He's gone. It's all good in there.
Oh my gosh.
And she's like, I'm a dog. I don't know what you're saying.
I'm fine. That's been there since I can remember.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so I'm just, I don't know, thinking about that.
Just experiencing anxiety on behalf of your dogs.
Yeah. Surgery always makes me anxious because I've had surgery before and it sucks. And everyone's always like positive about it. Everyone's like, it's going to be fine. It's just minor surgery. And I'm like, I understand that I'm not going to die, but this is still pretty awful.
Yeah.
So I don't like
that's
it.
how I feel also. People are like, your wisdom tooth surgery is not going to be that bad. They're going to put you totally under. And I'm like, they are going to saw through my jawbones to take my teeth out. And you want to tell me not to worry.
Right.
I feel like that's, worthy of considerable worry.
Yeah, exactly. My worry is always the unlikely event that I will wake up in the middle of it. Because I've told you this, I'm not going to tell you guys again because I don't want to take up too much time. But I kind of woke up out of a twilight once in my surgery. And I didn't feel any pain, but I was awake. And it is terrifying. So I don't like it. And that's always my worry. Scary. So the wisdom teeth surgery was actually the easiest one that I had because I did not wake up at all.
Well, it should be. Yeah. So many people get it should be easy to perform. I feel like
I would hope
sufficiently because it's so
pretty common. Yeah.
Yeah. I might have to, I don't care if this is TMI. There is a procedure. It's a laparoscopic surgery. So it's not super invasive. There's a lot of surgeries like that, but for women who have endo, if it like gets in the way of your fertility, sometimes they have to go in and like cut the endo off or whatever it's in the way of. And so it's very possible I might have to do that. And even that I'm like, so I'm going to be out of commission for a little while from that. And then my mom actually had, I'm sorry, she really doesn't want me to share this. I'm going to say it anyways. She had a hysterectomy via laparoscopy, which is cool. Oh, that's not super typical. Yeah. She had a bunch of fibroids and stuff too. And her endo was really bad. So she had like a whole bunch of stuff going on. Her surgeon was amazing. So I always go to the surgeon's clinic just to see my normal doctor. Cause I'm like, I trust you guys. You've done the amazing. And so anyways, if my endo just continues to be bad, then I might have to do that. And my mom had such a hard recovery, which a hysterectomy is like one of the hardest surgeries to recover from as a woman. And so, and then she got an infection and I was just me at home with her and she was so sick and had such a high fever and I had to take her back to the hospital. And it was that's terrifying. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So like, I know that that's not in my immediate future, most likely, like 99% sure it's not in my immediate future. Like a good 70% sure, or maybe more that at some point I will have to just because of my family history, but I'm already panicking about it for no reason. Yeah. I'm like, what if I just preemptively worry now and then also worry then? So I just double the worry instead of just waiting to worry about it when it happens. So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah. I have to go in at some point in the next 2 years, I have to have another pacemaker replacement. And like, this is not, I've done this many, many times, but in this weird way, I kind of thought that by now I would have like a significant other to help me. Oh yeah. But it's just going to be my parents unless something changes. And I just feel weird going into an adult surgery with my parents. Your parents? Yeah. Why? I feel like that's strange. I don't know. I just assumed that they would kind of have phased out and that I would have like,
but they probably know
Cool.
more about it. But I will happily come down there and I will take you.
So
If you would
you're
rather
gonna
me
come
take
across
you.
a couple states.
I would do it. If you want me to,
So nice.
you think about it. I will do it. If you want me to be
Okay.
there, I'm happy to. And then I get to see you bonus and we can hang out while
That's
you're
true.
recovering.
That's true. And I can't run away because I'll be recovering.
Exactly. So you'll have to like talk with me and stuff. Actually, we'll probably
Exactly.
just sit there and write and watch TV some. But
That would be awesome though. But
yeah. This actually, hang on, we could turn your next surgery into a really fun girl time thing.
that is true.
So if that appeals
All
to
right.
you, you let me know when you have it scheduled. And
Okay.
I swear I'm being completely honest. I will put it on my calendar and I will plan for that.
I believe you. You don't flake like I do. So I believe you. But what a weird thing to turn into a friendship bonding experience.
But see, then you don't have to worry. Then you have something to look forward to also.
It's true.
You know?
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, not that my parents are weird about it. They would totally do it. But I just feel weird.
Your parents
about
are
it.
wonderful.
Yeah. So
I can kind of see that, I guess. I feel weird having my husband take me to get my wisdom teeth out because
so it feels normal because he's your husband.
I guess, but I feel like everyone's always has their wisdom teeth out before they're married, usually.
Oh, yeah, often. So,
yeah. However,
fair.
my mom might have to take me anyway since he's not here. We'll see. My insurance, woohoo! I'll have it again in December, I think. So I'll actually get to go get my wisdom teeth out because
good.
It's bad. They need to go. So I'm guessing actually my mom will have to take me. So I'll get to have that like post-adolescent experience for myself.
Yeah. I mean, my wisdom tooth people thought I was 15 and asked me for like, they like that I needed to do another x-ray and stuff because I was still young. And I was like, I don't think I'm as young as you think I am.
That's so funny.
Could happen.
Wow. Now I'm offended because when I went, they were like, you're nearing the cutoff for the safe wisdom teeth removal. Did you know that? And I was like, what do you mean? And I was like 24, like had just turned 24, I think when they said that, or was almost 24. And they were like, well, you know, when you turn 25, and I'm like, I'm not 25 though. And they were like, when you turn 25, the chances of hitting some nerve, so you you permanently lose feeling in part of your lip increases like 10% or something. Yeah. And I was like, thanks for telling me, you know, it doesn't change anything. I still have to get my wisdom teeth out.
It's true. So, although I don't think it's a big deal because I was 26. So, and they still did it. And
a lot of people get it after 25. Yeah. I'm not that concerned. Also, losing like feeling in part of my lip is not the end of the world. Like, I feel like it'd be weird, but I'd get used to it. So I'm not super worried about it at all.
Yeah, it's fine.
I am just like, they have to cut through my jawbone to get my bottom wisdom teeth out because they've grown into my jaw. And I'm like,
it does suck. I mean, I didn't have to have that. I'm just saying surgery sucks. So
yeah, I'm lucky. I don't think I've, knock on wood, until my insurance is active, knock on wood, I'm actually do it so the fairies don't hear me. I have never had to have surgery. So, see, they can't hear me because I knocked on the wood where they live.
Is that where that comes from?
You knock on the wood so the fairies living in it can't hear you.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I tell everyone. I mean, it's really particle board, but
yeah,
this is a pretty like
close
gross.
Enough.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Well, anything else this week besides concern for your little pups and their little surgery?
No, that's it.
Aww.
So normal stuff.
Well, I have an update I'll give because it's not my writing update. I finished reading Karissa's book. It was so good. I like stopped and I gasped out loud multiple times. And I was like staying up late to finish it. And I was like, I am gonna finish this thing because I was like so into it. And then like I loved it. You did your book in part 1 and 2 because I was like, oh my God, are we like nearing the climax? And I was like, but we can't. There's still like half the book left. And I was like, oh, it's a part 2, which you've probably said at some point, but I just forgot. And then I was like, oh my God. And I'm always a big fan of part 2s because the part 2 always tends to be, it's like the rising action, but even more intense. That's why there's the part 2. And so I was like, oh my God, I can't look away. Like someone was trying to talk to me and I was like, get away. I need to know what happens. I was having such a good time. And then I was like in a daze for like the next 12 hours of my life. Because I was like, this world is not real. I'm still yay. Karissa's book.
It was the best response.
It was so
good. Yeah, I feel like this book has 3 biggish twists that kind of get bigger as they go on. And so like 2 are in part 1. And I'm like kind of tricking people like, oh, we're coming to the end, which of course, if you have the physical book, it's not going to trick anyone, but you kind of feel like you're getting there.
But
and then it's like,
where could it possibly go from here? It's like Falling Kingdoms where you're like, really, what could happen now? And then you're like, oh my God, that did not just happen.
Yes.
It's crazy.
So
You
I'm
did.
so
Your
glad.
twists were delivered excellently. I know you were
Good.
concerned about your bad boy character. I
Mhm.
think excellently. I mean, I don't think I've ever written a bad boy character like that.
Oh,
Like,
good.
how much can I talk about that character without you
You can
feeling like
talk
I'm
about
giving?
him.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
He's pretty much a bad boy, right? Not
Mhm.
like a just a morally gray. And I don't
Yeah.
think I've ever even written a character that's a straight bad boy. Mostly
Mhm.
I write the morally gray characters. So when
Right.
Chris was talking about writing this guy, I was like, I don't, like I have like morally gray advice basically and like some
Yeah.
hypothetical bad boy advice, but I've never applied it. And then
Mhm.
you came out with this character and I was like, oh my God, she did it. Like he's so attractive, but I know he
Yay.
shouldn't be, but he's so
Yeah.
attractive. And that's the whole bad boy thing. And I've never
Mhm.
even done it myself. And I was like, she did
Mhm.
it. She did it. She did the
Aw,
thing. So
yes.
it was excellent.
So
I
excited.
so enjoyed it.
Yay. I'm
Yeah.
obviously so glad because I was worried that maybe I was giving too much away too early or that I
No,
wasn't giving enough where it would be confusing.
I think your
So
delivery of all of your twists was perfect. Because
yes.
every single twist, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't get that. I
Yeah.
started to suspect the last twist, but
Uh-huh.
it was like, but not in a way that was like, oh, too soon.
Right.
And then at the end, I was like, oh my God. And I was so excited. Oh my
Yay.
God. So many good twists. None of
Thank
my
you.
books have twists that good. The one I have planned, my whip has a really good twist, but it has like
Mhm.
one of that level. So
Yeah.
excellent work on your twists.
Thank you. I mean, it is a standalone. So I feel like standalones almost need more twists to
Yeah.
like carry people through a whole story, whereas a series
Mhm.
is going to be maybe one per book. But
Yeah.
yeah,
That's true. I need to see it, and that's the book that I'm thinking about maybe doing for NaNoWriMo. I'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
I think it would be a standalone, and so I don't know what twists I would put in it, but yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Well, I mean, since you talked about mine, I am also reading Ashes, and it is also so good. It's like book one in a series, so it's good in a different way.
Yeah.
And I got to like this halfway point. Like I texted Ash last night, so she knows what part it is.
Yeah, at
But
4 in the morning, I was like, why is she awake? I was already awake because someone else had texted me, my husband.
Yeah.
But then I was like, what is Karissa doing?
I'm self-destructive when it comes to sleep. So
Yes, you are.
I just hit this point where there's like kind of this reveal coming and that happened and I was just so anxious. And it's kind of like I always want characters to get really mad and to like kind of just go off on people. And like she doesn't because she can't for many reasons. And I was just sitting there like, what's going on? What is she gonna do? Is he gonna figure out what's going on? And it was so good. I'm not done yet. I'm like 20 or 30 pages from the end. And then we had to do this. And I was trying to finish it before recording this, but I was like, I don't want to rush it because I'm also trying to edit and stuff. And so I found myself reading and I'm like, oh no, I stopped editing for the past 3 pages. Then I had to go back just to make sure.
I had to also. I had to do
Yeah.
the same thing with yours. And then I had to go back to the beginning because I had already edited the first 3 chapters. But I actually think here's a hot editing tip for everybody because the first like couple chapters are always so different because they've typically been edited more. I think, plus you're trying to get in the flow of it. Just like when you get in the flow of reading a book or writing a book, I think read the first few chapters, put whatever comments you do have in, then go to like through the rest of the book. And then at the end, like when you're done editing it, go back and do the first few chapters again.
Yeah.
That's
when
what
you have
I
that
did.
established voice in mind.
Exactly. And then you also know like, ooh, is there anything I can foreshadow in the first few chapters that happens later? Yeah. And so hot editing tip. That's the first time I've done that. And I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. Why have I never done this before? So
that is a good idea. Cause the first 3 chapters, especially that first chapter, is so hard because you edit the crap out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it can feel different.
And you also don't know, like when you're editing for someone, like you don't know like what voice they're going for in the book until you've read the whole book. And like, then you really have a feel for the voice. So then you can go back and edit for it, which is nice. And I can't believe I'd never have done that before, but now I'm never not going to do it again. It was an accident.
Permanent
it worked so well.
Facet of my editing. Stuff now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, do we have any book recs for the listeners today?
I did the Catherine's Corner episode on this, but it's called the Dark Elite series by Chloe Neal. And it is a super fun, like younger YA kind of series. Like I would assume like 14, 15-year-olds would really like it. And it's just so fun. And the main character is super sarcastic and sassy. And I really like that. And it's fun. It's 3 books: Firespell, Hexbound, and Charmfall. And so if you guys haven't heard of it or read it, I would recommend. They're super cool.
And you did your episode on the whole series, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
But I didn't do any spoilers. So you can listen to it. Well, I did like light spoilers, but you can listen to it without having read them and it won't spoil it too much. So
that's impressive. My book rec is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. In honor of Halloween, and because that's what we're doing on That Pretentious Book Club this week. So our sister podcast will have that episode up. But Frankenstein's the first time I've read it. And I will say this about it, because I always feel like I always have to give a disclaimer with classics, because I'm not naturally someone who likes classics. The language is elevated. So it is, you do have to really focus, I feel like, to read it. It's not something you can listen to on audiobook unless you're going to actually pay attention. You know, like you can't just have it going while you're doing other things. You have to pay attention to understand it. But it's pretty short. And so because it's like, I think it's like 150 pages or something. So for me, the length kind of makes up for the elevated language. And also the plot is really good. And it's an epistolary novel. So I didn't know that, which is
why
also
are so
really
many
fun.
horror books epistolary? Dracula is too. That's so strange.
It is very strange. I don't know. And you guys, if you've never listened to our sister podcast, That Pretentious Book Club, it's a comedy book club podcast. And I'm just saying, you guys should dip in there this week just for the author bio, because I went in depth on Mary Shelley. I'll be giving the author bio this week. And oh my goodness, the scandal. I did not know. So much scandal. And so I'm very excited to get to talk about the scandal. Oh, and our old pseudo roomie / college friend Lexi, aka Foxy, will be joining us over there, because she is, we call her the Holiday Fox, but she used to live with us, even though she didn't technically live with us. And she's also a writer and a reader. So that'll be fun. But so Frankenstein, there's my book rec for you guys for this week, which also is what we read. But I'm gonna have to start coming up with more book recs next season, because because things are changing over at TPBC. So which is in good ways, things are changing. But I think I'm actually gonna have to put more effort into my book rec planning. So we will see how that goes.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Exactly, in honor of Halloween. But what about our word of the week?
Yeah, so speaking of Halloween, I picked like a kind of Halloween-y word. It is horripilation. Horripilation. I don't know quite how to say it, like syllabically. HORRIPILATION. And it is a bristling of the hairs on the skin from either cold or fear.
There's a word for that?
Yeah, it's like kind of like goosebumps. You can use it kind of the same way, but
oh my God, of course there's a word for that. Why wouldn't we have a word for that?
I know.
Horripilation. Oh my God.
I know. It's like horror at the beginning, and then it also has like ripple in there kind of. So it's very like a sensual word.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Horripilation. I cannot believe we let this fall out of normal use. I'm ashamed to be an English speaker.
Right? It's so good. And I don't know if is it a horripilation or an horripilation? I don't know.
I'm trying to think of a sentence I can use it in to see how it naturally comes out.
The horripilation of no. I don't know. All the examples were A or and.
A horripilation on my skin.
Yes. I like that. You used
Does
A.
That work?
So
yeah. So A.
Works. Yeah.
Yeah.
You just got to feel your way, gut instinct through the H's.
That's a gut instinct one for sure. But I think I vote we bring back horripilation.
Yeah, I like it. And it's cold or fear, which is, those tend to go in tandem anyway. Yeah.
They do. It's true. The colder something is, the scarier it is. Sorry, Alaska. It's true.
That's true. What is that super terrifying vampire movie that takes place in Alaska?
What?
The vampires like take over the town for the whole winter because there's no sunlight. It's a famous movie. You would recognize the title if I could remember it. You guys know what I'm talking about, right?
No, thank you. Oh, hi, doggies. You guys are gonna lose your uteruses soon. No, the poor babies.
Anyway,
should we horripilation? Should we get into our theme for this episode?
Yes, we're gonna be talking. I don't know if this is a trope or just a concept, but we're going to be talking about time travel, which is one of my favorites. I really love time travel in books. I will
happily admit up front, I've never attempted it because I get such a headache thinking about time travel. I'm like, oh my God, like you guys, not a spoiler, but just like there is some time travel stuff in Carissa's book. And my head was like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute.
See, it's so weird because I don't know, maybe I just have a brain for this, but time travel has never really confused me that much. A lot of people will say like, it's so hard to write it. And I'm like, is it? I don't know. But
you also are really good with logical reasoning and like identifying fallacies and like circular reasoning. Like you're really good at identifying those. So I think it's got to be part of how your brain works. I'm not as good at it. If somebody points it out, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But for the most part, I'm not naturally really good at that. And you have talent for it.
Well, thank you. But yeah, maybe that's why. Maybe it's because really the thing about time travel, you can do anything you want, any kind of time travel, whatever, as long as it is internally consistent. So if you think that, you have an idea for time travel, but you can't get all of these tiny details right, it doesn't really matter as long as you can make it feel real and feel consistent. Because if you think about, so first of all, time travel is often a science fiction thing, but I'm going to talk about that in a minute. If you think about other scientific concepts like quantum physics and biology and all that kind of stuff, there are holes in it. There are things we don't know. And so it's not unreasonable to just not have all the answers to the particulars of time travel. So as long as it makes consistent sense, as long as it's not like it works this way one time and then it works a different way the next, I think you can get away with basically anything. And if people come up with holes, I think it's usually easily explained by like, well, this is just the way it works. Kind of like, most scientific things, like it doesn't have to make total sense for you to know that that's how it
Sci-fi
works.
does this a lot. Yeah. Sci-fi does it a lot, but it's so normal for the genre. But I don't think, and I think that probably a lot of people think of sci-fi when they think time travel, but I don't think that time travel has to be in a sci-fi genre.
Exactly.
I think it's actually really interesting when it's not.
I like fantasy time travel because here's the thing, when you put magic in there, you can just make up the rules, which is what I do. And you do not have to be scientifically accurate, which is the benefit of fantasy. It still has to be internally consistent, but it can kind of go however you want. So like I've written a lot of books, so I feel like this isn't a spoiler. At some point I have a time traveler in one of the books, and it doesn't have to, when it's like magic, they don't have to technically like hurt things when they time travel, because you can make it just part of the magic that this person fits into the timeline wherever they are, which is what I did. So it's like, if a time traveler time travels, they can't like hurt anything. Like it's not within their capabilities because magic. And so like maybe someone else can if they time travel, but you can kind of fix a lot of holes by just saying, well, magic, and like this is their ability, and that's how it works. And I don't think it's a cop out, because I think this is true of most magical things. It's not a cop out to just say that, well, this is how it works.
Yeah.
As long as it kind of makes sense and you are following the logic all the way through, you don't have to have the super detailed scientific explanation for it.
Yeah, that's
like
true.
Even thinking like Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, like she goes into some detail, but it's not like you can actually create life in a lab like happens in that book. So she doesn't have all these scientific details about how that would work.
No, she doesn't.
So it just has to make sense for the story.
Which is nice for fantasy. I think Mary Shelley is the one they call the mother of science fiction, right? That's Mary Shelley.
So. That makes sense. Yeah.
Because some people consider that to be the first sci-fi novel. And I guess it does lean more sci-fi than fantasy. But I think what sci-fi has become and what distinguishes it more from fantasy these days is that in sci-fi, you get some kind of explanation for things like time travel or, reanimating the dead. In fantasy, you're not even expected to give an explanation. In science fiction, like the Illuminae files, which is an amazing series I love, they actually had like astrophysicists look over their book and make sure that everything that they had described happening in space would actually happen that way scientifically, which I love. And I love that for them. And it makes it great science fiction for what we know science fiction to be nowadays. But because that's the expectation for science fiction, I actually think that's why time travel might be a little more difficult in science fiction. I guess there is. Did you ever watch that show? It was called Terra Nova.
Yes, you had me watch it.
Yes, I loved Terra Nova. And I can't remember if that was they went back in time in like a different universe, or I think it was just that they just went back in time in their own universe.
Yeah, it's like when the dinosaurs existed.
Yeah, so when the dinosaurs existed. Yeah. If you guys haven't seen Terra Nova, there's only one season of it, to my great disappointment. But it's another one like Firefly, where it's like, how?
Yeah. It's prime television. So you're missing out if you don't watch it, but be aware that it ends.
Exactly. And in that world, I guess maybe your way to circumvent the having to explain your time travel in a sci-fi is that your characters live in a world where time travel is an acceptable norm to some degree. Because like we don't explain how milk gets to the grocery store, right? But we all kind of know, but you don't have to explain it to anybody.
Right.
So in a world
it's not
where
weird for milk to show up.
Exactly. So you wouldn't have to really explain that if they live in a world where time travel is normal. And in Terra Nova, which is a TV show, but I think this applies to books as well, because they live in a futuristic society where time travel is not an out of the norm thing. It's kind of like taking like a really long airplane ride is like, you know, kind of the closest parallel I can think of. Like you don't have to explain how an airplane stays in the air. So they don't have to explain to us why time travel is possible or how it works. We just accept it because all of the characters accept it. So if you're like, time travel is just a headache and I don't know how to do it and I don't have like all the reasoning behind it, I think you could do fantasy or sci-fi. Fantasy, your options are you can use magic and to explain it. So you don't have to actually explain it technically, which is way better. Or you can do sci-fi, in which case you can explain it scientifically if you have the brain for it. I think that that's probably going to be a big old headache that's going to get you spinning in circles though. So it might be easier to put your character who is experiencing time travel or talking about it in a world where time travel is a norm, at least to some degree. So you don't have to go into too much detail about how it works.
Exactly. Yeah, that's good. Also, if you guys want a good example of science fiction level time travel done really well, the TV show Continuum is amazing. It's 3 seasons. It's complete. Like it's a whole story. So you get an ending. The last time I saw it, it was on Netflix, so it might still be there. And it is fantastic. Like it goes into certain scientific explanations, but it doesn't go so deep that it bogs things down. I think that's really where time travel sometimes fails. This is why the time machine
science fiction fails. No offense, science fiction. I love science fiction.
It's true. But. And with like the Time Machine by H.G. Wells, that was the thing I didn't like about that book because it's just so much scientific explanation. And it's the point of the book is plot, not what it exists. Because like really, I don't believe that time travel is actually possible. Aside from like basically moving forward, like we all do. So like I don't know that there is a correct answer because I don't know that it's actually possible. But I did briefly convince myself that it was possible when I was creating the system in my book. And that's kind of what you want to do for readers. You don't necessarily, it does not need to be the correct answer. It just needs to be so convincing that they kind of sit there and think, wait a minute, but like, wouldn't that work?
It's about the suspension of disbelief. You just have to give them enough logic that they can suspend their disbelief for the situation. You don't have to give them enough logic that they can suspend their disbelief for time travel in real everyday life. Although I will, because I do listen to conspiracy podcasts, I do a few times a year go, what if time travel is real? But that's just a few times a year because they have managed to give me enough evidence to suspend my disbelief for a moment.
Exactly.
I think for me, the hardest part about writing time travel, and I liked how you did it, but I just think it's really hard to actually apply, is the idea of if you have a character who goes back in time and changes things and then things are different in the future, and were they still there in the past, if they were gone in the future doing future stuff, and that whole thing, which you did really well, but that's just what I have a really hard time with. I don't know if you have any advice for that because it's such a headache. I don't even know how to ask the question. It's such a headache.
It's true. It's the butterfly effect, right? And the grandfather theory. So the butterfly effect is that if you go back into the past and you step on a butterfly, you change the entire course of history because that one butterfly is now not going to be eaten or reproduce. And then that's going to ripple out, right?
Right. There's a short story about that. Is it The Sound of Thunder? I think is what it is.
Oh, is it? I think there's one called The Butterfly Effect too. So there might be multiple ones.
It is a good concept for a short story. So I bet there are a lot, actually.
It is. And it's like in the short story that I'm thinking of, he goes back, he steps on a butterfly, and when he comes back, the like English language is not the English language. Like it's not, he can't even read it. because it's totally different.
Yeah.
And so the grandfather theory is the paradox. I think it's called the grandfather paradox. Or if you go back
Paradox,
in
that's the word
time,
I'm looking for.
yeah.
How do you
If you,
write around the paradoxes?
right, because the question is, if you go back in time and kill your grandfather before you're born, then you never
wouldn't be
existed,
born.
which means you didn't kill your grandfather.
Yeah,
And
you
so it
weren't born,
creates,
so you couldn't time travel back to kill your grandfather. So
right.
like, this
like,
is
like what do
what
you do?
it is. See,
Yes.
you understand it so much better than me. You
I
can even put
do.
it into words. That's why I'm so scared to write time travel, because even if you go with a fantasy explanation or whatever sci-fi explanation, or you've just decided like the people in your universe just know what time travel is, they don't have to talk about it, you still have to deal with the reality and the logic that every person has in their head of paradox. So
That
that's
they're
where
going to
you
think,
have
wait
to
a second.
Exactly. So that's really the disbelief you have to contend with, I feel like, is how are you going to address the idea of paradox? You did it great, but I couldn't even
Thank
put into
you.
words how you did it, because I was like, wow, I believe this. And I was like, why don't I have a problem with this? And I couldn't even tell you.
Okay, so I think there are 3 solutions here. Let's see if I can remember. I have 3 right now. Let's hope I remember all of them as I go on. The first one is kind of like what I was trying to say before, that if you have a time traveler that is where it's like some kind of personal ability, or it's just like within, like you were saying, the fabric of the universe, it's just like a normal thing that people do, you can have this kind of caveat that the time traveler can't ruin things throughout time because they belong in all time. So they, like if they do time travel back to before they were born, they can't wreck anything because they belong in that time. They would just be acting the same way anyone else in that time is acting. So that's kind of what I kind of go with, where the person doesn't, like, they don't have the ability to do harm. They, like, for time travel to matter, they kind of have to have the ability to fix things, to like change things, but it won't like suspend their own existence, because it's a paradox. It can't happen. Like none of their choices would lead there.
So maybe it only, in that case, like the changes they make only affect things that they would have interacted with or been affected by in their own life, like that kind of thing, where it's just, they don't have, no change that they make has the power to affect, anything beyond their purview of life, basically.
It's kind of like the moment they show up in that new time, it's as if they were always there. So nothing they do necessarily changes.
And in the past, it's like they never left. It's just that they're not there, but it's not like they never existed.
Yes, exactly. So they kind of just
you can get away
everywhere.
with, I guess more in fantasy, I guess that's easier to explain. If you're going to try and go for like a scientific explanation, I don't know how you would do that. I would recommend not doing that at all.
On the scientific level, I think this can work magically or scientifically. You have the concept, and this is kind of what continuum does, where the second someone time travels, they create 2 alternate timelines. So now you have the original timeline that keeps going back. That person just doesn't exist on that timeline anymore. The second they go back, they no longer exist on it. And then when they go back to that time, it splits off and creates a new timeline where they do change things and affect change.
But then what about the old timeline?
I know. And so then can they ever get back, or do they have to manipulate things to go essentially the same way to get back? That's the question. I think that's more scientific.
Yeah. That's a more science. If you want to go scientifically fair, I would say that's probably the direction you're going to have to go.
Yep.
Because as I believe, and I'm not like a scientist, but I do listen to a lot of conspiracy podcasts. And I did actually study astrophysics for like a good 6 months, which I know is not a lot, but I will say that makes the most sense for what we know scientifically. So if you're trying to write like a true to science fiction, then that might be the closest you can get to something that would work without the paradox getting in the way and completely nullifying your entire story.
Right. Because in this example, it's like if you go back in time to kill your grandfather, then you are never born, but the you that time traveled just stays on that timeline. You're just now a part of the timeline, as if you just popped into existence at that point.
Exactly.
And so it kind of solves the problem. You're not going to cease to exist and create a weird paradox. It's just that you are going to erase your own existence, but not the current you. You're going to like erase your general existence. There are a lot of directions you can go with it, because you can say, okay, can 2 versions of the same person exist at the same time? So if you go back and don't kill your grandfather, but you do something else, and then you are born eventually. So now there's old you and young you. Or you can say
in Umbrella Academy, they do that. It's kind of, they change the timeline, but it is the same universe. So it's not a parallel timeline. It's the same one.
Right.
But they make it like a funny thing. If you guys haven't watched Umbrella Academy, I guess that's probably another actually good example of It's a really unique take on time travel. I haven't seen it done before. It's a little fantasy. It's a little sci-fi. I think it's more fantasy than sci-fi, but they do the thing where they go basically in season 3. I don't want to give away spoilers, but if they get close to somebody, to their double in this timeline, then bad things happen. Which is actually not the first time I've seen that trope done, which makes sense.
But that is a cool way to do it.
It is a cool way to do it. Yeah. I honestly think for somebody like me and not Karissa, who this does not come naturally to in any way, if you need time travel for your book and or you want to write time travel into your book, maybe watch a bunch of movies and shows where time travel, and read books where time travel is used. I think that there's no other way to get to the point unless you are naturally someone like Karissa who's like thinks very logically. But I think you have a bit of a rare mind. I don't think most of us could do that. So if you're someone like me, no shame. I think your best bet is to consume a lot of media content that includes time travel, because then you'll just kind of absorb the theories and you can kind of mash them up however, because it's fiction. So you can do whatever you want with it, but you have to have somewhere to start, and time travel is so crazy. So I think just absorbing as much of the media we have about it as possible is a good idea.
Yeah. And there are so many ways to do it. Like I said before, I don't really think there's a wrong way to do it as long as you're consistent. You can go the magical direction, you go the scientific, you can blend them, whatever. And you can come up with a lot of different ideas about what problems time travel would cause. So if it is like the scientifically minded one, do you erase your own existence? Do you create an alternate timeline? What happens to the original timeline? Does it stop the second you time travel, or does it keep going without you? And what changes at that point? And so I think it's a really good, there's a lot of variety, and maybe it is because a lot of people just don't know how to write it, but I feel like there's plenty of room for more variety, because I don't think it's being done to the fullest extent.
I think there's a really big option, or I should say opportunity, in time travel for sacrifice, for personal self-sacrifice. Because you could have a character who either knows they have to make a change that means that they'll never exist, or maybe they have to make a change where they jump 5 years into the future. And that means that they leave their family, like their wife and their kids or whatever, for 5 years, and they don't know. And then in 5 years later, he can see them because he's still in that, timeline or whatever. And they finally caught up to him, basically, which I've seen like that people catch up to you thing. I've seen that done a lot. I like that trope.
It's fun.
But then he would have to either leave them alone, or he would have to explain to them why he was gone for 5 years, which they can't really do. So I think that time travel inherently involves either sacrifice or the willingness to sacrifice, because even in your book, there's not really any guarantee. We're just kind of hoping for the best. So I think time travel is something that's really sacrificial of your character who's doing the time travel, whether it's intentional or not. So that's just a good thing to keep in mind. It's not like sacrificing their life, but it is like I'd sacrifice my life for you doesn't mean as much anymore, when it's like a pretty common trope. And honestly, like it's pretty
I'll
common
sacrifice
in my life.
my existence for you.
Exactly. I will say I had somebody in my life who used to say, I would die for you, because they were they were kind of just an ass, just kind of not a very nice person. And they would say something like, I would die for you, and I'm thinking, I would die for like a stranger on the street. Like if I could push him out of the way of the bus and take the hit, I would.
Nothing.
So I'm kind of like, that doesn't really say much. And so especially in fiction where we see that, it's not that that's not a bad trope, because if you get your readers close enough to your character, obviously your readers will care very much if that character dies, because you would care very much if someone in your life you cared about died. So that makes sense. But it is kind of just switching it up to say this character is going to sacrifice themselves by erasing themselves from existence, which is totally different than dying. And or you could do the thing where they have to disappear for 5-10 years and they can never reconnect with all of their loved ones, which sounds worse to me. That sounds so much harder to me. So
especially if they can't explain why. So your family feels abandoned or whatever.
Exactly. I think that's like a fate worse than death. So if you're like, death is not a high enough sacrifice, maybe your book is missing time travel.
Exactly.
And you can see why I'm terrified of time travel.
Yeah, it does terrify me too. So this kind of brings me to the third point and the third kind of solution to time travel if you're kind of having trouble with it. And this is also why I think I might have the time travel mind, because when I was young, I read the Sisters Grimm series. And so, light spoiler, book 5 has time travel in it. And this was the first time that I had seen time travel done forward. Right. So they go into the future, which I think is very different than going into the past. And so they go to the
That is
future. They
interesting.
see all this stuff that's going to happen. Like this good guy is a bad guy. This bad guy is actually a good guy. And so is going to marry so and so. And so there's all this like information they now have, and things have gone really wrong. So they go back specifically to their own time to change things. And I think that's a really cool way to do time travel. It kind of fixes all the problems because at that point, you don't want that future to exist. And it's okay to erase it. And anything you do to erase it is the point. And so it doesn't create the same kind of paradox. And I really like that. And I obsessed over this book so much. And that's probably why I have a time travel ready mind, because I went through all kinds of theories about that one. And like what would still exist and what wouldn't, and does it create an alternate timeline and all of that.
Yeah.
So I think maybe doing a future thing could also be really cool.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like logically, like what's the problem when you think like going into the future? I feel like going into the future is there's a lot less difficulty because I feel like you don't have to contend with the you never existed thing.
Right.
I think you have to, maybe you could contend with, did they age when they went into the future? Yes or no? Did they, because in the future, you don't have to worry about changing the past, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. What if you bring something back from the future? Like you time travel
Would
something
it cease
from the
to
future.
Exist?
Exactly. Does it do
like
something
if your only
weird
way
there?
to like save your new friend in the future is to bring them back, is that something you can do or not? And do you have an explanation for it or not? Because if not, maybe theme it more to fantasy.
Exactly.
I love fantasy for that reason. It's not supposed to be a cop-out. It's just conveniently a cop-out.
Exactly. It can work. So yeah, I think it can work. And then you also, so people poke holes a lot in the Harry Potter time travel thing, because they're like, oh, well, if time turners existed, why didn't they just go back in time and stop Voldemort, right? And this is kind of the issue that comes up with psychics a lot. If you have psychics in your book, anything kind of time related, there do have to be, is that the right verb? There does have to be.
It's good to know you have some flaws. It really helps me feel better about myself.
Oh, good. There does have to be some kind of system of rules about what is allowed, like on a universal level, like what will create a paradox that you just simply can't do, right? If you time travel back to kill your grandfather, maybe time travel won't let you time travel, or something like that. With the Harry Potter thing, they wouldn't, I think this is the explanation I always assumed was the answer. They wouldn't have done that because by the time they realized what Voldemort was going to do, going back in time would have changed too much, and it would have like erased certain people's existences, and it would have, destroyed anything that had been built up during the time that he was becoming a problem. And so there's this kind of general understandable rule that if you time travel, you are going to fix things, and you need to weigh whether or not it's worth it. Like, is going back in time to save one life really going to matter if you then cause thousands of people to never exist? Or is it worth it because then 1,000 different people will exist? Or it's kind of like, would you go back in time to kill Hitler? And my answer to that is always no, because too many people have been born since then that, maybe their family lineage operates a certain way because someone did die in the Holocaust, or because they didn't. And of course it's terrible. And if you're living in a modern day Holocaust, you fix it, but you wouldn't go back in time to change it because you would screw up too much.
Well, it's like the idea of, would you go back in time and change your own past, which is something that I've like thought about a lot. And I've even had people ask me that, and people say, oh, that should never have happened to you. And I'm like, I mean, you're correct. There's no justification. So it's not a justification for the Holocaust. It's not a justification for anyone who's been treated badly, but you would not be who you are today. And I like who I am today, because it's not about what you've been through. It's about how you reacted to what you've been through. But without those experiences, you would be a completely different person. And so, I mean, it's also just doesn't do any good to think about this kind of like, there's literally does no good to think about that. But it also, it's another sacrifice. You sacrifice a lot of the way things are. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I know this sounds really weird, but Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., there's a lot of time travel in the last few seasons. And basically they do go back and change something. They come back into the future and realize they have to give up so many parts of their life because they're a different way now than they were because of what they changed. And what they had changed was a similar thing. Like they thought they were saving a bunch of people, and they did technically, but it changed so much. And so they still had to sacrifice probably an equal number of people because of what they changed, which is like it's the big consequence of time travel. Like it's the big scary thing you have to keep in mind as a writer if you're going to use time travel is I think time travel always comes with consequences of some kind.
Yes. And that's really what a time travel story, or a story, well, I'll get to this in a second, but a story with an element of time travel in it, it's really what it's going to be about, because obviously we can't go back in time and stop Hitler, but is it interesting to think about and to wonder at how things, you know, may have been, maybe that was, I don't want to say this, but maybe that was a better situation than something else, or maybe it had to happen for something else to happen.
Yeah,
you can explore
know
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
In time travel
if
stories.
The best books are, and I did this with the recent outline I've done, because I've decided, I think the books that I like the most are the ones that just like really seem to have picked their setting from a what if, like what if this never happened, or what if that never happened, and maybe something better happened instead, or maybe something worse happened instead, because humanity kind of sucks. I don't know if anyone has noticed that recently, but but if you guys are struggling to come up with a unique setting for a fantasy or sci-fi book, just asking, what if one thing was different? That it's just crazy how much it changes everything, how much it changes your setting, how much it changes what your characters know and what your characters believe, and like what's commonplace, like culturally, to understand and believe. So just something to really keep in mind if you guys are trying to think of a setting, and or trying to think if you're trying to do time travel in your book. And thinking about, is there something worse than what's happened, or something better than? But then even if you change history in your book and something better happens, there are still bad things that are going to happen, because, and we've said this before, no matter what your genre is, I personally truly believe that the job of fiction is to relate the human experience. And so it's nice, because by doing that, you can relate to your readers. You can make them feel like they're not alone, which I think is so important in fiction. It can reveal things about, you know, their life and the way that life could be. And I'm losing my train of thought, which is unfortunate, because I've had 2/3 of my drink at this point.
Well, it's just that time travel, like anything else in fiction, you use it to relate back to some kind of human experience or emotion.
Exactly. You don't want to time travel, yes, is outside of our human experience. And I think this is the point I was trying to come to. Whenever you do something that's really outside the normal human experience, you want to make sure that the rest of your story is really, really human, which you did great in your book, which is really nice. Because a lot of people, even in fantasy, when there's no sci-fi, or sorry, no sci-fi, no like time travel, and sci-fi as well, actually, in that genre. Actually, I think sci-fi is worse about forgetting the human experience than fantasy, which is weird because you wouldn't think it would be, but I actually think it is. Can forget to include the normal human experience. I think it's really important. So things like, you know, normal relationships, you did that great in your book with relationships, normal human interactions, all of those things don't change. Guess what, you guys? There are dick drawings on the Colosseum. Men have been drawing dicks on everything since Roman times. And I know that's kind of crass, but I always think of that as a like really tangible example that humans do not change. Our language may change. Occasionally, our cultural values may change a little bit. And I do mean a little bit, but for the most part, the human experience remains the same. And so in a book where you're going to do something like time travel, that is so hard to wrap our heads around, you making sure the rest of your book follows like a pretty standard human experience, like love at first sight. If you're going to do love at first sight and you're going to do time travel, listen, for me, that's a lot to swallow, because love at first sight isn't, you know, we don't really see that very often. Time travel, we, you know, hypothetically don't see at all that we can prove. So that's two big things to swallow. So I wouldn't include those in the same book. And maybe that's my preference, but I do think when you're asking your characters to believe this one big unbelievable thing, the rest of your book should be so much easier to believe, romance or otherwise. So I think that's something to keep in mind, which is, like I said before, what I really liked about your book. You definitely did that. And that's what I liked about Terra Nova too, because there's a bunch of human relationships and drama that's going on. But it's like, oh my God, that is exactly what would happen. Even with people we know now, even though it's set, you know, like 1,000 years in the future, and they're going back to dinosaur times with time travel. So you would think those people would be really different. Humans do not inherently change. We learn, we change our technology, but the inmost desires of our heart and our personalities as humans and our emotions and our emotional reaction to each other, that does not change. It has never changed. And I like the fact that it doesn't personally. But that's something to keep in mind when you're writing a book, whether it's time travel or using some other trope that's really hard to believe. It's really important to be down to earth with the human aspect if you're going to be really out of the atmosphere with some other crazy part of the book.
Yeah, definitely. And you kind of touched on, we kind of said this, but I just want to reiterate it, or maybe put it in a different light, that when you write time travel, a lot of things, but especially time travel into your book, don't overdo the like aghastness. That's not a word, but that's the only word that's coming to mind. Don't overdo how disbelieving the characters will be. At some point the characters have to believe it, and they need to believe it faster than readers. So if it's a totally new concept, if time travel has never happened and this is the first time, like if someone creates a time machine for the first time, you want people to be doubtful, because accepting that right away would be weird. But they also need to accept it relatively quickly once they see some kind of evidence. Because if
the
you
combination of humanity versus suspension of disbelief.
Yes.
So difficult.
If they spend too long sitting there saying, I just don't think this is possible, it's not going to make it seem more real to readers. I think there's this instinct in us as writers to say, well, if I just acknowledge that this is really outside the box, then people will get it and follow me. They won't. You need to make it feel more inside the box. And that's going to mean that the characters need to accept it faster than a normal person maybe would. And you can do that by giving them evidence. If it's a scientific thing, then give them the evidence. If it's a fantasy thing, make magic in general a real accepted thing, so that they just have to leap from all magic to specifically time travel. Make the leap I don't know, just help them get there faster. Because otherwise readers are going to be weird.
Don't make them leap. Build a bridge. Whether it's magic is your bridge or it's your scientific facts. That seems really, really hard to me. So instead, I recommend the bridge of
the magic.
It's already accepted, so go for it. Everyone already believes in it. That's what I would suggest. If you have a scientific mind, I would love to see a sci-fi where I believe the science of time travel. It has not happened yet.
Really interesting. Okay, so I don't know, this is a weird example. So I read, over the past 2 years, all 3 books in the Pathfinder series by Orson Scott Card. And is that his name? Card is the last one, right?
Orson Scott Card is the name.
I mean, okay, I was thinking, is it Orson Card Scott? But it's one of those. He wrote the Ender's Game. Okay. He wrote Pathfinder, and then what are the other 2? It's Ruins and Visitors. And they are very scientific. So like you gotta pull through the scientific stuff. These books are essentially just like this treatise on how would time travel work in like 80 different ways. They go into a lot of theories. But it really works.
So really good to read if you're going to write a time travel book.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It gives you a lot of food for thought, and it does go down the science-y way, but it's also kind of a magic. And it just, the way that it explains it, I feel that he has a very logical mind to explain things. Sometimes he like over explains it a little bit, but maybe he doesn't. Maybe I'm just getting the point faster than most people would if my brain works that way.
I feel like you're probably just getting the point faster.
Possible. But these are really good books. We've been talking about a lot about TV shows, and they can also be great. But if you want some books that you can kind of sit there and like study if you need to, and they kind of expand on each other, that's a great one. Passenger by Alexandra Bracken is also a really interesting concept. She kind of closes the paradox with the idea that time travelers can only show up in one place once. So once they've been somewhere, they can never go back. And so they can never cross their own path or anything like that. What are some other good examples? I talked about continuum. I think alternate universe books can also relate and tie back to time travel. So 1,000 Pieces of You is a really good example. I loved these books. It's a trilogy by, is it Claudia Gray, I think is her name. These also kind of talk about how little tiny changes in the past create completely different worlds 1,000 years later. And if that's a question you want to confront with your time travel book, then you should do that. And that would be anything alternate universe would be great to read or watch for that. And then I do think I feel like I had more examples, but the Sisters Grimm books, time travel is a small piece. It's not the whole. It's like, I think 2 or 3 chapters in one book out of 9. But it does kind of inform the things that they do as they go on. And so you can have time travel just be a small piece instead of the whole. And so just reading or watching a bunch of different takes on it, I think can help you kind of cultivate a mind to understand it, as well as maybe your own unique take on it.
Yeah, I agree.
So.
The author, I think her name is Laura Brooke Robson. We interviewed on That Pretentious Book Club. I think that's her name. I just heard something crash.
Are you supposed to be alone?
No, my brother is here somewhere.
Oh.
But I will put a note to make sure I check as part of the episode. I want to say she wrote the deaths. Hang on, I have to check real quick because this is important to my point. So I don't want to say she didn't write it if she did. I think someone's watching a movie really loudly.
Oh.
No, it's not her. Okay, so I'm gonna have to change that. Who wrote the deaths? Oh, Nicole Lesperance. That's who it was. Okay. So over at That Pretentious Book Club, we interviewed the author Nicole Lesperance, and she wrote this this book. Oh no, I take it back. I was correct. I was correct. It was Laura Brooke. I'm sorry. It's because I think about the depths a lot. It was a really good book.
Yeah.
By Nicole Esperance. You guys should go check it out. But Laura Brooke Robson wrote The Sea Knows My Name, which is a YA fantasy, and there's pirates and stuff. But on her website, when I was, reviewing it before our interview, she has this whole page. It's a bibliography of nonfiction books that she read before she did her book. And I've mentioned this like once or twice before, but I think as people who adore fiction and adore like movies and media and all that good stuff, I think that we tend to forget, like, you know what, you could also read nonfiction. It gives you really good insight. So particularly if you're doing sci-fi, but I do think it could still help if you're doing fantasy, reading books about time travel is not a bad idea. I think his name is Michio Kaku. I can never ever pronounce his name. If you guys know who he is, you will know what name I'm trying to pronounce.
That somehow sounds familiar and totally new at the same time.
I know. Let me try and see if I can get Google to pronounce it for us real quick. But he writes a lot of science fiction stuff, and I feel very certain that Michio Kaku. I'm gonna look up name pronunciation. But he writes a lot of not science fiction, but actual science books, but stuff that you would think is science fiction. Is a lot of like theoretical stuff. So stuff like that, like, watch the History Channel and the Science Channel when they, do those documentaries that you're like, is this real? And it's like, no, it's really blown up for the media. But you can get people like, he's been on those channels, so that's why I learned about him. And so you can learn, you can kind of learn. Oh, hang on, I found it. Here we go, guys, but I'm going to try. Kaku Michio. So I wasn't too far off, actually. Michio Kaku.
Not bad.
Yeah, not too bad. I'm proud of myself. But anyway, so he's written a lot on like space stuff. So I don't know if he's written a time travel one. I wouldn't be surprised. But watching like History Channel, Science Channel, all that good stuff is a good way to find people who you could follow and read their stuff. Otherwise, just like Google it. I'm doing that for the book I'm writing right now. The character I was talking about, the blue-haired assassin, she was an orphan, but she was in a really unique orphanage. And I don't know, did you ever hear about those orphanages in Romania where the children were basically, they were, diaper changed, fed, and bathed on a schedule,
but not loved
or interacted with, and they just stopped crying completely.
Yep.
And so
a lot of them died.
Exactly. And it's horrifying, so horrifying. And so I thought that is so interesting. That says something so unique about like the initial experience of being a human when you're a baby, and I want to know what it says. And so that's why I chose to give my character that. And so I literally just bought 2 books that are about that specific case, and they followed some of the children from that orphanage where they did the study, because I want to know what happened. And so reading nonfiction is also a really great way. And everything, I will obviously preface, everything you read about time travel that's nonfiction is still theoretical.
It's theory. Yeah.
It's theory, but that's still pretty good. So if you're like sci-fi and you want a reason behind it, and or if you're fantasy and you don't have a mind like Carissa's and you want to understand what time travel could look like a little more, not a bad idea to do some nonfiction research.
And along with that, in the nonfiction realm, looking into like logical fallacies and kind of developing maybe a more logical sense for how to think. Philosophy classes do this really well. Read Socrates, like those kinds of things. Aristotle, they think very logically through.
They do,
like morality and that kind of stuff, which is also something that's going to come up in anything about the human experience. Thinking through that kind of stuff on a logical level, and then you will probably catch a lot of plot holes in any kind of time travel trope you
Yeah.
write, also give it to other people to read, as always, because they might catch things. And it's a good
Yes.
thing if you are like beta reading or editing for someone that wrote time travel into their book. Just make note when you have questions, and maybe it's okay for 1 or 2 questions to be there, and it's
Yeah.
just a suspension of disbelief, like, okay, not everything is answered, like we don't know everything about black holes, right? It's okay.
Yeah.
Just because it's scientific doesn't mean it has to be answered all the time.
Yeah. But you want to give your readers the
But
impression that you know
yes,
more about it than they do.
exactly. So maybe the characters hint at an answer to that, or there's some kind of hint in the prose about that. You just don't want there to be like 20 questions throughout the whole thing where you're like, I don't understand how this works at all. 1 or 2,
That's
3
true.
is fine, but not an abundance of questions. So
Yeah.
just kind of keep that in mind too if you're editing for someone like that, and then ask for that feedback, and take that feedback if you're writing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you had mentioned it before briefly, but I wanted to come back to it because it's a really big problem with time travel. I think everyone should keep in mind when you're deciding if you should include it or not, because if you're not ready to contend with this problem for your book, then maybe it's the best not to until you're ready. But the idea, there's that big like philosophical question, like if there's somebody that you love on the train track or whatever, and then on the other train track there's like 5 people, right, that you don't know, but they're strangers, who do you save? And it's an awful question because every life is worthy of saving. I know, see, you love it. I hated it. So I was like, oh my God, I want to save. There's not a good answer. And I feel like in ethics, my answer of there's no good answer should have been completely acceptable. But my philosophy professor was like, that's not an acceptable answer. And also you use too many adjectives in your essay. And I was like, that's rude. I've gotten an A on all my other essays, so I don't believe
this is my major. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I probably bitched about that before. But I think something to keep in mind is the idea of if you are going to it depends how you set up your time travel. If you set up your time travel in a less limited way, where your character goes back in time, changes something, and then it ends up changing things for a lot of people and or sacrificing a lot of people in the future who are not going to exist anymore, you have to contend with the fact that you are approaching that question of, do you save the one or do you save the many? And I mean, there's so many arguments to make for both sides, so I'm not going to say like which one is right. I don't know that there is necessarily a right one. It's very nuanced, but you are going to have to contend with that. And considering that philosophers still can't agree on that, that might not be what you want to contend with. So you might want to break the rules of the quote unquote rules of what we believe typically about time travel, which is where fantasy is really nice, and or the science fiction where you just don't explain it scientifically because you don't have to address it. Because if you do something like only the things in their purview of life change and change for the better, then that's pretty decent.
Yeah.
That's, you don't have to worry about that too much. But like the going back and like killing baby Hitler, you also have to be like, well, it's killing a baby infant who has not, even begun to explore their potential, who's not like Hitler. I think a better option would have been, I wish they would say, would you go back in time and like befriend baby Hitler? Because I think that that's different, because who we are is largely influenced by who we're around, especially when we're young. So not that it would necessarily change anything, but does it make it okay to kill a baby? It's like, like it's the big philosophical question. It's questionable. And so if you're going to write time travel, my main point is this: you are going to run into those philosophical questions. If you have time travel and or murder in any of your books together, you're going to hit that question. If you kill someone out of time, and you're going to have to either have set up your book so you can skim past it and no one's going to notice, or you have to set it up where it's not going to affect other things. I do not recommend it where you're like, and it changed everything, because your readers are going to hate that. They're going to hate that.
Unless it's a short story.
But short stories, we like Sound of Thunder. We accept a lot in short stories that we would not accept in a novel. So I think you need to be aware of what challenges you're going to face when you write time travel. It's not for the faint of heart. Of all of the tropes, it is not for the faint of heart.
It did take me several years to work out a system where I felt confident in writing about it. So, that's what happens.
Still don't know how you did it.
Thank you. So just the last kind of point on this topic, I guess it's debatable if this counts, but do time loops count as time travel? And I think they do. You said you think they probably do too.
You texted me about this. You called it the Groundhog Day phenomenon, which I didn't think about, but you're correct. I should have known what you meant, but I did not, because I don't understand anything about time. Like, it's so far from my mind, you guys. knock on
These are
wood,
things I
you'll
think about all the
never
time.
catch me writing a time travel. See, I don't know how you do that. I probably will never write anything time travel, but I think that time loops count as time travel because they typically, the idea with a time loop is that whether it's 51st Dates is actually interesting because it's not actually a time loop. It's like one person in a time loop and everyone else isn't. So that's interesting. And I do love that movie. Groundhog Day, obviously. There's this other what is it? There's a Christmas movie. It's something about like
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's some like the
50 Days of Christmas or something like that.
Yeah, and there's like it's like a bunch of like ex-girlfriends of Christmas past or something.
Remember. There are probably a bunch.
There's a few.
We might be thinking of different ones.
Yeah, there's actually weirdly a lot of like time travel Christmas movies, but a lot of them are Hallmark, so they don't have to worry about any kind of logic. You do have a much more intense magnifying glass on your book though than Hallmark, I promise you. So do not. They're fun and I love it, and I love Hallmark, but do not take them as like writing advice.
A lot of TV shows do their own Groundhog Day episode. Supernatural has one. If you guys ever watched Haven, they have one.
Yes.
It's the heat of the moment. Oh my gosh.
Those are so interesting. And if you are concerned that you cannot pull off the time travel thing and deal with all the consequences of it and establish them in like a way that makes sense, maybe a Groundhog Day time loop. Maybe you don't need time travel, you need a time loop, because instead that gives your character the chance to go back and live the same day or the same week or the same period of time over and over again until they get it right and they figure out, you know, what they need to do to get to the future that's not horrifyingly tragic. So I think time loops are actually, they're done a lot more, I think, in movies and TV than in fiction. I don't know if I've ever read it in fiction, but I'd be interested to see it.
Yeah, there is, Lauren Oliver, she wrote Panic, right? That's what that's called. She wrote Delirium, the dystopian book.
Oh, yes. Delirium.
Yeah, so she wrote Before I Fall, which is, it's not a spoiler, but it's a Groundhog Day style thing where this girl, all her friends die in a car accident. She's this lone survivor, and then she relives the day over and over and over again. It's pretty good. I think it has some bad reviews. I really liked it. I thought it was done really well. So it just depends.
It would be easier logically. I think that would be easier. However, I don't know that you can really substitute it. If you have time travel in your plot already, that would be pretty much impossible to substitute, because typically when you see a time loop, aka Groundhog Day situation, that's the whole story, is them trying to escape the time loop, which makes sense. So if you guys are starting from scratch and you want to play with time travel, maybe a time loop is easier to warm you up and or just read a bunch of stuff about time travel first. But if you already have a time travel book, that's probably not going to be an option because it limits your plot to one day and or 1 week or one specific amount of time. So it's kind of an alternative to, but not a substitution for time travel.
It's true. And you could mix up the time loop in some way. Like, what if one person knows they're in a time loop and they just have stopped trying to escape? So they just live the same day over and over. Maybe they're not the person that's resetting the time loop, and they just they're like, hey, I'm in a time loop. This is weird. This is like day 40. I'm just going to keep going on with my life as is, like something like that. Or I think Haven, if you guys have ever watched I think it was on the Sci-Fi Channel, the show Haven. It's really more of a fantasy. That time loop episode is really good. Because it just does it in a unique way. Same with the Supernatural episode. That was probably one of the best Supernatural episodes.
I do recommend, if you guys, you don't even have to have watched Supernatural to get that one. If you guys want to write a time loop, great idea. Watch that one. It's the one that stands out to me the most. And I've watched like the first 4 seasons of Supernatural. Javi has seen all of them because he's obsessed with Supernatural. But that's the one I remember the most. So highly recommend, if you guys are going to write a time loop, good one to watch.
It's good. And then also Lost Girl, if you guys ever watched that. If you know anything about me, it's weird that I watched this show, but I did.
It is weird that you watched that show.
They have a time loop kind of episode in which the main character is the one like trying to fix the time loop, but there's another guy in the time loop that knows it's a time loop, and he's just like, I guess I'll just lean into this and try a bunch of different things to see what'll work to get this girl to like me and whatnot. So
that is so funny.
Yeah,
I like
so
that.
That's good.
That's
there are a bunch of different things you can do with it. And so time loops are, because they are so insulated, they are easier to do because you can make the consistency factor is so much easier to get to, because it's like you just have to have the events of one day and then put variations in there.
Yeah,
So
exactly. I think, like many things with writing, if you're writing a book that involves a time loop or time travel or literally anything else, and you get to the end and you have this inkling that something's not really justified or explained enough, and you go, I kind of still have questions about this myself, your readers will have even more questions than you have because you understand the story more than they do. So if there's anything that you, at the end of your book, that you still have questions about, you do need to address those first. What that means, skewing it more fantasy or making it so that time travel is more acceptable, or doing a just crap ton of research into time travel or time loops, then do it. Because if you have a question, it's going to be more than just a question for your readers. It's going to be a problem for them. You always know more as the author. So it's okay for your readers to have questions. It's not okay for them to have problems with what you've written. Assume your questions are their problems. And regardless whether it's time travel or something else. But with time travel particularly, I think that that's a good lens to turn on it, because time travel is so hard to pull off. I'm still not going to attempt it. I will happily, proudly say I'm not ready for that. I'm not going to attempt it. I love reading time travel and watching time travel. I will not write it yet. That is too hard.
Do you think through it really hard when you watch or read it, or do you just kind of let it be?
It depends. It totally depends how it's written or how it's presented. Like yours, I didn't really think through that much. I was just like, yeah, that makes sense. Moving on.
Right.
And I've done that with other, shows and stuff too, that I've seen, like the time loop. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Moving on. And I didn't think about it that much harder. So it just, and I think I will say, because I think that the rest of that episode and the rest of your book focus so much more on the human experience than on the unbelievable, that I wasn't being asked to believe multiple hard to believe things. I was just being asked to believe this one really hard to believe thing. And then everything else, I was like, oh, this is familiar. This is just being a humanist. Maybe there's like magical powers or some sci-fi elements included, but it's not, I'm not being asked to believe anything crazy except for this one thing. And so I don't really have a problem with that. But I think if I was being asked to believe time travel and a couple other things that were also unbelievable, I would be like, I don't like it. It's just too unrealistic,
Yeah. You got to pick and choose when it comes to time travel. Maybe go with some of the more normal tropes or normal other elements instead of
like, would you do enemies to lovers with a time travel? I feel like you could do it. You could. I won't say you can't, but it would feel more unrealistic than a time travel with a more realistic romance. Because be honest, you guys, in real life, enemies to lovers is not that common, for good reason, which is a good thing. But in a fantasy that doesn't include time travel, enemies to lovers is like, hell yeah, this is so satisfying. And that's the big thing you're asking them to believe. Maybe this is just a writing philosophy that applies to not just books that include time travel, but you really, if you're going to ask your readers to believe something big that is not in their normal world, there needs to be like one or two things. I don't think you can ask your readers to suspend their disbelief for that many different elements at once. I just think it doesn't work. You're asking way too much of them, especially because they're coming to your book for an escape, and also probably to feel like they're relating to something like them and not alone. And so it's that paradox you have to be really careful with. So if you're doing time travel, it's just such a big ask that I think more than even other slightly less believable tropes, I think you should be really careful to make everything else more relatable, because it is a massive ask to ask your readers to believe in time travel and to believe that it works the way that you wrote it. So
that's real. I think that's the biggest thing. It's like, okay, let's assume it does exist. Is this how it would work? And you have to kind of pick, are you going to go, you can blend it, but you have to pick, are you going to go really scientific and go with like the most likely option? Are you going to go maybe even like theological, where it's like an act of God? Are you going to go moral? Are you going to go magical? Are like, what is the basis of this very particular type of time travel? And you have to lean into that. And again, there are variations on all of those, but you do have to know which one you're going with, because if you try for a theme that's moral, but your time travel system works too scientifically, maybe those don't match. And so you need to kind of make sure that your theme is going to that your time travel theory is going to support your theme. Exactly.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I almost forgot, but I think with something like time travel or anything else that is the level of unbelievable to us, and or completely we're unable to understand time travel as much as that, it better be in support of your theme. That's all I can say. Anything that draws the attention to your story that much, needs to be in support of your theme. So if your theme is that everyone has second chances, okay, time travel is actually, might be a pretty useful tool you could use to display that. It's not necessarily going to support every theme that you pick.
Right.
If it's like the strong prey on the weak or something, and that's your theme, because you can make anything a theme. If that's your theme, time travel doesn't really have anything to do with that. It's going to kind of feel like, why did you use time travel to try and tell that? And it's not because
it's a lot to do in one book.
Exactly. It's a lot to do. It feels like too much. Maybe that could be a theme in your next book if it's a series, but that's about it. How do you feel about series that utilize time travel across series? Because I feel like it's easier in a standalone. But
I agree. The problem with doing it across a series is that you create the potential for more plot holes. Because the more that happens, the more likely you are to hit a plot hole. And
the more
so
paradoxes you create,
it's easier,
the more they travel.
It's easy to contradict yourself. This is why I don't plan to read or watch Outlander. I know a lot of people love it, but I am too logical in the way I think about time travel. And if there's even one plot hole, it will ruin it for me. So I'm just letting it sit as something for everyone else. Maybe it is really logical, but I'm afraid because there's so many books and so many seasons. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think time travel is really hard to pull off over a whole series because you would have to contend with the plot holes and the paradoxes you create in each book in the series.
Yes.
If you are going to be so brave and you are going to attempt to write a series that includes time travel in each and or more than one of the books, I think that might be one where you need to plot out the whole series and or finish writing completely the whole series before you query it. I would very, very much caution you against querying and or publishing your series if it includes time travel in multiple books and it's not completely done yet. Because the paradoxes you're going to create, you could pull it off really great. You could make like the most masterful, you're so smart, good for you. If you have Karissa's brain and you have an insane, crazy drive that I don't understand to put yourself through a lot of suffering and you want to do that, maybe you can, but you need to finish it first. That's not something you can't really go back, with time travel.
Right. You can't fix it.
Yeah, you can't fix it because the whole point is you've already gone back and fixed it. So you can't go back and fix it again. So if you're going to have a series that includes time travel throughout, I won't say it's impossible. I will say you need to wait to publish until the whole series is completely written. And I think I stand by that. Yeah.
Yeah. You need to know all the details. You need to know so much about how that time travel system works that you just won't hit plot holes, really. And that's going to take time and probably writing through the whole series so that you have gone through all the different iterations of time travel you want to go through.
And then you're going to have to go back and probably change some stuff to make sure that there are no plot holes. That is just
write a timeline.
Ton of work. You have to keep a timeline and keep an alternate timeline for the first time they travel. You have to keep a new timeline for every time they travel and write down all of the changes that would happen hypothetically as a result, whether you're doing like a limited thing and they can only change the things that are in the purview of their own existence, and or if you're doing something like, a Sound of Thunder, or like the one that Chris was talking about before where, you step on a butterfly, no one speaks English anymore. That's very different. So you need to know, I think, going in also before you get too deep into a book that includes time travel, is what changes is my character capable of making? Yeah. It's a lot.
Definitely.
If you guys are doing it, you're really brave. More power to you, but you're really brave.
And I think the only way around, if you're like, I want to do a series and I want time travel, you can't just put it in one book, like the Sisters Grimm series does, like Harry Potter does. You can just have it as a plot element in one book in a larger series. I think that works really well because readers can come up with a lot of theories if they want, and their theories don't have to be canon or match or make sense. So you give them that fodder, but you don't come across the same kind of plot holes.
Yeah. And then do not bring up time travel again. I agree. I think you can pull off time travel like once in a series. I don't think you can. It's not to say you can't pull it off more than once in a series.
Of the series.
Yeah.
Then it can work, but it's hard.
Yeah. Then you need to stop and take time and make sure the whole thing is completely written and done and no plot holes before you query it or publish it. But yeah, I think like one book in a series you can do. You might even have a little more flexibility as far as logic goes, because if you've already written a few books and your readers have accepted your logic, they might inherently accept the logic of your time travel because they already trust that you're a logical person.
True.
Does that make sense? So you might have a little more flexibility with that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's possible. I also feel I have no other points. Do you have other points?
No.
Okay. I also feel like I just need to give an obligatory shout out to Back to the Future because we were talking about
I almost did earlier
time
too.
travel.
Thank God.
People also criticize these mostly because of the title, which is ridiculous. The title makes perfect sense. But I really like these because if you look at them as a trilogy, you have him going back like what is it, like 20, 30 years, then you have him going forward, so nothing conflicts there, and then you have him going back so far into the past that assuming that major events still happen, his life will be the same, although when he goes home things are different. If you haven't seen the Back to the Future movies, he does change things whenever he travels, but he doesn't change them so much that his life is no longer worth living. In fact, he usually changes them positively. I would call those like comedies as opposed to tragedies in like the Shakespearean sense, because things get better.
Yeah, rather than worse.
Yeah. So those are also good movies to watch. I think their logic is pretty internally consistent.
I almost brought it up earlier, but because I haven't actually seen all the movies, I just know about them. I was like, I don't feel like I can.
They're some of my dad's favorite movies, so I've seen them many times.
I think the fact that so many people like them is good enough reason for you to go ahead and watch those and say, oh, maybe I could take this approach to time travel, because obviously they nailed it enough that people feel like they can relate to it and believe it.
Right.
And they can suspend their disbelief for the like hour and a half of the movie is.
True. Yeah. Is it John Mulaney that does a bit about Back to the Future?
Yes,
like he goes back in time and get this, he's gonna try to sleep with his mom. Who greenlit that?
Oh my God. Yeah, if you guys haven't seen, we're big fans of John Mulaney, his comedy, and he does the whole bit that's about Back to the Future and like who is trying to pitch Back to the Future. It is very funny. I do think time travel is one of the hardest things to pitch because
it's hard to make funny too. Because it's so serious.
It's very serious and it has a lot of consequences. I think that's the other thing. We said sacrifice, but also consequences might be a better way to say it. Time travel should, whether it's good or bad, should always have consequences. So you need to make sure that you're leaving room for those in your book and compensating for those and tying those in. But time travel always has consequences.
It does.
Yeah.
But also it does make sense that his mom has a crush on him because he looks like his dad. So I would just like to put that out there.
It's true. It's not her fault.
It makes sense. If he looks like his dad, then it makes sense that his mom, this did happen to my dad when his mother got Alzheimer's. We went to visit her and we think she thought he was his dad because she kept kind of like touching him and he was like, this is weird.
It's weird for him, but really sweet.
It is because he looks like his dad. So this is very reasonable. I just feel the need to defend these movies because I do really like them.
Sweet.
So it makes more sense than you think it does. I think people either think about it too shallowly or think about it too deeply. And it's like when you go time travel, you need to hit some middle ground there. If you go too far, nothing will make sense. If you think about it too shallowly, nothing will make sense. So you have to hit that middle ground in your explanation and in your mindset as a reader.
I totally agree. If your reader is not someone who's willing to believe the unbelievable, then they're not going to believe it anyways. But you as a writer need to find the middle ground. You need to provide some explanation, but not an explanation that's so detailed that it can be like disproven or like they can logic their way out of it. So there is a middle ground, just like with the paradox thing. Writing time travel well involves finding the balance between paradox, between how realistic, how not realistic, how much explanation are you going to offer versus just hope people believe it. There's so much balance involved. I feel like you have to have a really good sense for that. But I mean, Terra Nova is one of my favorite shows ever. Like they nailed it. So you guys can nail it. You just need to like really be aware of what the requirements are, I feel like, of writing a good time travel story.
Yes. And that's knowing really exactly how the system works, but then not explaining in all of the detail to readers how it works. Give them what they need, but you know
have
more.
a better idea than the readers do, but that doesn't, time travel is really complicated. So you don't have to completely understand time travel. You should, I would say like 80 to 90% understand how time travel works in your book's universe. It's fiction, so it doesn't have to be scientifically accurate, and that is perfectly fine. But you should understand like 80 to 90%, like how time travel works in your universe, in your book's universe. And then if your readers only understand it like 20%, that's okay. Because if you write with the conviction that you know what you're talking about, they will believe that you know what you're talking about. If you write and you don't have the conviction that you're like, I kind of don't know how this is really going to work, they'll sense it immediately and not love it. So
Readers are bloodhounds. They smell blood. So
They
if
really
you
do. Yeah, that's scary but true.
yeah, if you are even slightly unsure, if you're like, I just want to hedge a little bit, readers will be like, here's every plot hole we've ever seen. And you're like, oh my gosh.
It
But
is
if you're
so
confident, they won't
stressful.
notice.
Yeah,
So
I realized because I'm kind of it's so funny. People have called me perfectionist. I do not think that I'm perfectionist because
mhm,
I'm very productive. That's very different. I like to
true.
get things done. Do I need them done perfectly? No. Here's the problem. When you are looking back at what you're editing and or if you're still in the writing process of writing and you go, "Oh, does that make sense?" I just move on and I go, "Good enough," because that's my general outlook in life.
Yeah.
It's not good enough. Okay?
Right.
I don't want to encourage perfectionism because I know a lot of writers really struggle with that. But I think as a writer, it's better to be on the perfectionist side of things, at least in the editing stage. Do not be hard on
Mhm.
yourself when you're writing. Write the damn book. You can edit it later. Don't worry about editing
Yes.
while you're going. But when you're in the
Agree.
editing phase, I think it's much better to be on the perfectionist side, even really far on the perfectionist side, than on the it's good enough side. Because
Mhm.
that's the whole point of editing is for. And the problem is if your goal is to be widely read, your readers will pick up on the imperfections. So you want to,
Yes.
anything that strikes you as imperfect, you want to address. You will inherently not pick up everything. You could publish your book and go, "Oh, I wish I'd done that different." I think J.K. Rowling has said stuff that she wishes she had
Mhm.
done different. It's inevitable, and that's
Right.
okay. But if you see it and it's an imperfection, you should write a note to yourself and then go back and fix it later. Because every time I haven't done that, I have regretted it so deeply.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, just I guess it is good to overanalyze. I don't know if you are the type of person that needs to be told that, but if you're the kind of person that needs to that already
They're
overanalyzes,
different people.
you're good. If you're the kind of person that is like, it's good enough, you need to overanalyze.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you know who you are.
Yeah. While you are writing, do not overanalyze. When you are editing, overanalyze. You all know yourselves, you know what your strengths are. So go ahead and temper yourselves. Either chill while you're writing or really like hold yourself to the fire when you are editing. Like you guys know what you need to do. I need to hold my feet to the fire while I'm editing because I'll be like, that's fine. It's not fine. So I think Chris is probably less like that than me, but
yeah, I'm an overanalyzer. So
yeah.
Which
is why it's good to have somebody else check your writing for you.
Exactly. True.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to say on that note about writing?
No.
Or sorry, about this
about time travel?
topic?
No.
Yeah. Writing time travel?
Yeah.
Well, what about writing updates?
I have no writing up, just editing your book is I've still been writing down like little ideas for my NaNoWriMo project that I'm still on the fence about whether or not I'm going to do, but it's in the works. So we'll see. But yeah, so just ideas, nothing huge.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you?
I did write a summary for a book I could do for NaNoWriMo. I do not know if I'm going to do it yet. And here's again, the problem is I'm not a perfectionist. So I'll be like, I'll give it a shot. I'm not really competitive with anyone but myself. So it's very hard for me to motivate myself with stuff like NaNoWriMo. So knowing myself, I'll probably give it a shot and we'll see. If it's flowing pretty chill, pretty smoothly, I'll probably try and push myself to finish the whole book in November. Am I going to 100% commit to NaNoWriMo? It's not within my personality. There's way too many rules involved with NaNoWriMo, and I hate rules and I hate deadlines. I mean, actually, here's the thing is I'm actually very good at deadlines. I've never missed a deadline ever. I always finish everything early, but I don't like being given ultimatums. It makes me angry. So I'm just going to do my best. I think I'm going to try and we'll see. I'm not going to officially say I'm doing NaNoWriMo because if I don't get the whole novel written in a month, I don't. But I am going to give myself the goal of in November, I'm going to try and I am going to start this book that I plotted out. And I plotted it out beginning to end, and it's a sci-fi book and it's a standalone. And my thought is it's just something else I can query. And it's an idea I've had for a really long time. And whenever I think about what else could I write, it comes to mind. And it's going to be in third person. So it's really good practice for my main whip that I'm still don't feel brave enough to write. So it'll be really good practice for that. So I plotted out the whole thing yesterday and I'm really proud of myself. And right now the plot feels kind of shallow, but it literally is just like a 20-point plot. And so like, of course it does. The story hasn't even like, it's going to kind of create itself as I go. So I'm just going to write down the little move that shows up in my head. So hopefully it'll be deeper when it's finished. Cause right now it's not that It's not that deep. It's like it's fun. It's a good plot. It could be a fun movie, but it's not like earth shattering. Hopefully it gets better when I write it. I guess we'll see. It's just plot points. So there's so much that you miss when it's just plot points, but I think you'll like the premise of it. It is sci-fi.
Yeah?
I don't know if you read a ton of sci-fi, but
I read what I read what is available in sci-fi. I want more. So
I think you'll like it. So, and I'm obviously very jazzed that I'm going to get your edits back soon, because you are the first person who has ever read the completely rewritten book and the first edits I've received on it. So I am like so jazzed. I did get another rejection today. I am querying prior to Chris's edits because I've said this before, but they typically only read your query letter and maybe the first few pages. So I'm like, whatever.
Kind of feel the waters.
Yeah, exactly. Like the first few pages aren't going to change that much. So if they're not into it now, they're not going to be into it. But I know I have time to see Chris's changes before anyone even possibly requests a partial or full manuscript.
Yeah, true. Same with mine, with yours, because I was like,
yeah, it is weird. It's funny because this is the book that the first time I queried it, I got a lot of positive responses and requests for partials and even requests for full manuscripts this time. And I know it is better. I know deep in my soul, and thanks to this podcast, I know that it is so much better written than it was before. I've had so much less interest already. And I'm like, it's because the market changes. And I saw somebody had written, YA fantasy is really hard to sell to publishers right now. And I was like, that's unfortunate, because that is my genre, pretty much. But I'm still going to keep trying. It just means that they're being pickier than usual. But it is so funny because it's just such a good example of, the publishing industry is so subjective, because I know for a fact this book was lower quality a few years ago when I was querying it, and I had a lot of interest. So if the market was now what it was then, like, I wouldn't be surprised if I'd already gotten some requests for a full manuscript in the first few weeks, because that's the kind of, response I was getting then. But the market has changed, and the market always changes. So we'll see. It's just means it's going to be more of a fight, or I'm going to have to wait for the market to come back around again. But I feel confident that this book is higher quality than before. And I'm so excited to see your responses. And I obviously am just like, what is she thinking now? I wonder if she's gotten to this part. Because you always wonder when someone's reading your book, you're like, did they get to this twist yet? I wonder if they thought about it.
Did they love it?
Exactly. Did they hate it? So I'm very excited to see what you have to say about it.
Yay.
And next time I listen to read Kendall's book, and I'm excited to hear from you. Every time you text me now, I'm like, is she done with it? No, she's not done with it. And so I get really excited. I see like Karissa, Catherine, Kat, Kathy, because that's what your name is on my phone. And so I see Karissa and Kathy, and I'm like, is she done? No, it's 4 a.m. And she's like, oh, look at this great twist I just got to it. I'm like, go to sleep.
Yeah, I'll probably text you at like 4 a.m. tonight, because I plan to finish it today. So
I'm like on the edge of my seat waiting for your feedback, because I totally trust your feedback, and I'm just so psyched. Like, if you like it, I'm psyched. If you just have a ton of feedback for it, I'm psyched either way, because then I get to make the story better. So regardless, I'm just psyched. I just can't wait, which I think you guys, not to like pat myself on the back, but I think that's a good place to be if you guys are having somebody read your book. You should be excited if they like it. You should be excited if they didn't like it a ton and just have a bunch of feedback, because either way, it's really good for you. So
true.
Just, either way is I think just viewing it, regardless of the response you get, it's a positive. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I'm so excited. And I sent all your notes, all the notes I took on your book, but I felt like at the end, I was like, wow, these are really minimal. Like, your book was pretty good. I mean,
that's nice for me.
Yeah. I didn't have too crazy much to say. I mean, I think the only like big notes I had were stuff you'd have to change for like the whole series. And like, they weren't even like the most important notes. I think everything else was pretty minor. So I had a great time reading it though. So now I'm going to read Kendall's book that she sent me. And then I'll be caught up on all of my friends' books I need to read, which is important. We said it before, you guys, have your reader friends read your stuff, and people who are not your friends, but please pay them minimum $50. Because again, I saw someone offering $10 for reading an entire 80,000 word manuscript and replying with feedback. And I was like, no one's going to do that. Or they're going to do it, but they're not going to put any effort into it because you're paying them $10.
You won't get good feedback.
Exactly. Yeah. So don't be afraid. Let people see it. If you're afraid of them stealing your ideas, make them sign an NDA. You can literally find a template on Google, get them to sign it. It's not that hard. But it is important. Yeah. So, and I'm enjoying now at the point where I get excited and I enjoy it. So that's my first goal, is by the end of October, I want to finish reading what Kendall's written. And then November, I'm going to try.
Yay.
Yeah. So we'll see. If you choose to do NaNoWriMo, we'll do it together.
Yes. We shall
It'll
see.
be fun. Yeah. But that's pretty much all my writing stuff. What about you?
Oh, well, I already went. I have written nothing. So
No, I just meant, did you have anything else?
Oh, no.
Okay, sweet. Oh, what did you, when are you going to hear back about the short story contest that you submitted to?
I don't know. I haven't gotten a response yet. I don't know if that's, normal or bad. So we shall see.
I bet it's normal.
Yeah.
Don't forget to check your junk mail though. I've been paranoid this last week because I ordered a bunch of people's Christmas gifts and I'm like, I didn't get a confirmation email. And so I'm like checking my junk mail for it. Because I'm a psychotic and I need everyone's Christmas gifts by like November 5th. I want them all ready for me to wrap. But
it's less stressful. So that's good.
Exactly. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed this episode, you guys can follow us during the week and get this kind of lovely encouragement and motivation and writing tips from us absolute geniuses over here. She says facetiously. You guys can get that on Instagram. You can get that on TikTok. We are the Scripturient Society. TikTok is where my microphone is turning sideways because I stepped on my cord. That's where you guys, one more time, hang on. I'm sorry. I have to pee because I drank most of my drink. So I'm a little bit distracted.
Fair enough.
Anyways, you guys can keep up with us during the week on Instagram and TikTok. We are the Scripturient Society. TikTok's got a lot of funny videos, which will make you laugh during the week if you're a writer, I promise you. If you just want encouragement during the week and or you didn't get a chance to listen to an episode and you want to see some writing tips of whatever it is that we covered, you guys can see that on Instagram. If you guys want us to cover a topic about writing in particular, you guys can email us at contact@storysirenstudio.com. That's our production company. You can also message us on social media. We'll see it. We would love to talk about what you guys want us to talk about. And you guys can also visit Patreon.com/storysirenstudio.com if you guys want to put some comments in. It is absolutely free to do so don't worry about it. If you guys want to support the pod, go to storysirenstudio.com and you guys can see our merch. We've got a lot of cool Scripturient Society merch, and I think my sister's working on some more right now. She's a graphic designer, so there's some cool stuff that's going to be coming your way, so go check that out if you guys like it. Regardless, we want to hear about your work, what you're working on, whether you want to email us or whether you want to message us or put it on Patreon. We love to talk writing. Obviously, we're going to keep updating you on what we're doing. If you guys like the podcast, if you wouldn't mind rating below, that would be great. And sharing with your friends. And that's everything I've got. So until next week, keep writing.
And we'll see you on the next page.